First, Politico reporting there is a new draft replacement plan, and it would cut Obamacare funding and the health care support for lower-income Americans who rely on Medicaid. Let's get to it with Christina Greer, an associate professor of political science at Fordham. Rick Hertzberg back with us from The New Yorker. And in Washington, Brian Darling, former senior communications director for Senator Rand Paul. Rick, what do you make of these developments?
Well, it could have been predicted. There is no way, when you actually seriously examine the question of health care and how to get health care to everyone, which is what Trump has promised to do, you discover that it cannot be done except the way Obamacare does it, or by something way left of what Obamacare
does.
Let's remember
government. Christina?
Well, I mean, this is why I think the Republicans are in such a bad position. I mean, they had 7 years to come up with a better plan, and they literally have nothing. And what they have will detrimentally hurt their constituents. I mean, this is also a plan that was upheld by the Supreme Court. So when we look at this particular administration, I think your point is really valid. Why, in an era of unified government where the president has both the House and Senate of his same party, why aren't they pushing through a legitimate plan? It's because they don't have one. And whatever they're trying to propose is actually really going to hurt their own constituents, and they know it's going to come back to haunt them, especially in the midterms.
So, Brian, it is a fact that there were all these votes up until there was a Republican president. My question to you as a Republican is, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I think they should vote tomorrow for a full repeal of Obamacare with no replacement. I think you could pass it in the House. You'd have a hard time getting it through the Senate. The Democrats would filibuster. Then you would come in with your repeal and replace measure. I mean, we've already seen this. Last year, Republicans passed a partial repeal bill as part of reconciliation, a bill that was vetoed by President Obama. That was one of their plans. Rand Paul has his own plan. He has a replace plan that would expand HSAs and provide more freedom to sell health care across state lines, health care insurance.
Are you worried politically that if they don't just get the repeal part over, they'll never get around to it?
I'm worried politically if they don't repeal Obamacare, they're going to anger the base. The conservatives are going to say, you lied to me. You said you were going to repeal this bill. This is a law that has not been proven to be very popular. I know that we're seeing polls move a little bit, and there are people who are concerned about losing their health care. I concede that. But the bottom line is this was never a popular law. Republicans ran on the idea of repealing it. They need to do it, or else if they don't do it, guess who's not going to show up in the next election? Conservatives. They're not going to vote for Republicans.
Interesting. Brian worried about the base getting angry. I heard both bases are already angry, but you can always get angrier in life. I want to play Nancy Pelosi speaking about this today. Take a listen.
When we did the Affordable Care Act, if everyone loved their care, if everyone loved it, which they didn't, and their insurance, we would still have had to do it because the escalating cost of health care in our country were unsustainable to individuals, to families, to small business, to corporate America, and to the public sector. If they come up with something that keeps lowering cost, expanding coverage, and improving benefits, then we can have something to talk about. But we haven't seen anything.
That is the Democratic message here. The White House sent us, and we want to show their response today. Brand new. She cited costs, they say, but families across the country have been hit with skyrocketing premiums. She cited increased access, but insurers are fleeing the system, leaving nearly 1 in 5 with just one insurance option. President Trump stands for patient-centered solutions to lower costs, increase competition, and give all Americans access to quality, affordable health insurance.
Well, I think if voters actually look at what this president has done thus far, we know that this president looks out for himself and his own personal interests. So I would be very cautious to think that any plan he has would actually put money back in their pockets. We know that Donald Trump will put money in his pocket and the pockets of his friends. I think also the Republicans are in a really tight spot because the longer their constituents are on some version of Obamacare, it will be much harder to just rip that from underneath them and then wait a few months or even years to give them something in their stead, especially for older Americans, especially for people who have pre-existing conditions. And so, I mean, there's so many areas where the Republicans have essentially wasted 7 years of not really putting real thought behind how they could actually substantively repeal and replace, and now they're in a position where they have unified government. If I were a Republican, I would be demanding to know why you are not passing a law right now that gives me something 10 times better than Obama, since you had a 7-year head start to figure it out.
Brian?
Well, I agree. I want to see something passed. And I do want to see our system reformed, because the Affordable Care Act has proven not to be affordable. Premiums are through the roof. It costs so much money. The government, we see our national debt hitting $20 trillion. Well, health care is a good portion of that. So I do think this needs to be attacked. I think there are smart members of the House and Senate that can figure it out. And if they want to figure out a replacement plan, I do agree. They need to work on it. They need to do it all out in open. But stop waiting. They need to do it now. I mean, the Trump ran on reforming health care. He ran on reforming our tax system, and for whatever reason, Congress hasn't done anything in both those issues. So I do agree Congress needs to do something, and they need to do something quickly. We probably disagree on what they should do.
Right. Major disagreement there, Rick. But then also, just on the politics of this, you even have John Boehner saying, well, maybe you don't want to do this repeal.
Yeah, and the fact is that premiums have increased, but they've increased at a slower rate than they were increasing before. And millions, tens of millions more people actually have insurance. If they're going to, when they talk about repealing the Affordable Care Act, it's a fake, because they cannot and will not simply repeal it and throw 20 million people off their health insurance and throw out all the great things that people are now discovering Obamacare does. So they might do some sort of thing where they say, oh, we repeal it, but the repeal doesn't take effect until some fuzzy time in the future.
Right, and that's
after the midterms.
Right, and that's what's actually so remarkable at this, given that this is something that matters to an enormous number of people, that healthcare has bedeviled administrations in both parties for decades, that Barack Obama was a president who made progress on it, or impact, whatever you want to call it. Republicans acknowledge the impact. They say they don't like it. Democrats like it. Here's John Kasich, who is a Republican, talking about why this is hard. Take a listen to Kasich.
I think there are some very conservative Republicans in the House who are going to say, just get rid of the whole thing. And, you know, that's not acceptable when you have 20 million people or 700,000 people in my state. Because where do the mentally ill go? Where do the drug addicted go? The Republicans can go and do what they want, and I'm going to talk to them. But at the end of the day, I'm going to stand up for the people that wouldn't have the coverage if they don't get this thing right. And I happen to believe that the best way to get this right over time is for actually both parties to work together.
Christina?
I think this is a fascinating beginning argument, because so much of Donald Trump's plans are thrown to states' rights, and because he knows he has the vast majority of governorships, he thinks that the governors will actually implement whatever plan that he wants. The issue is many Republican governors are looking at their constituents and saying, if I go with a Trump plan, that could actually hurt me and the members of my state. So I think the divisions in the Republican Party and the factions that I keep talking about will only get stronger and stronger. Right. Because, I mean, they've had 7 years. I mean, if you are a Republican, you're looking at your representative when they say, well, we're going to figure it out. Where were you? Right. You should have been figuring out. You should have been day one, January 20th, with a bill ready for the president to sign.
Christina Greer, Rick Hertzberg, and Brian Darling, thank you very much. Interesting policy topic.